All right, welcome back to the Engage Your Fanbase podcast. This is number 14. We're going to be talking about secrets to boosting your next CD release. I'm Kara Karma with Simon Says Booking and EngageYourFanbase.com, and I am joined by my awesome co-host, Erwin Schmankowitz of Ever Upward Entertainment. Excuse me, and he's going to be running the show today. So why don't I turn it over to him?
Yeah, I will be in the driver's seat today, so hopefully this goes well. As Kara said, my name is Erwin. I am a booking agent, manager, and owner of Ever Upward Entertainment. And today we were talking about the topic of album release and CD release releases for bands. So I think this is a really good topic that will hopefully give some knowledge to these do-it-yourself musicians and up-and-coming bands that these releases really kind of are really important to them, especially to growing bands and to bands that are first starting out and who need to get their music out there. So we can get started here. As always, we start with the question of why. Why do these artists? Why do you want to release an album? And for me, at least, there's three different reasons. Either one, you're a brand new band who doesn't have content anywhere online, or anywhere really. Two, you are, giving your debut album. And then three, obviously, you want a follow-up album to kind of retain your fan base and to, continue to put out that content so your fans can listen. Yeah, I think it's important to note with bands that first start out that having content, regardless of an album, really is huge. It's fairly impossible, and I'm sure you can attest this as well, Kara, being in publicity, but nearly impossible to and doing booking for Stone Church, but nearly impossible for bands without any sort of content to really even get gigs, and to really get in front of talent buyers. Even if you're a band starting out, I would recommend to, at least get some live content out there. So you at least have something that people can listen to, because no one will, go by word of mouth, or you can't really vouch for yourself in that kind of situation. You need to be out there and you got to have at least something out there. The importance of recorded content is obviously there. And, again, it's close to impossible to get those opportunities to make you move forward if you don't have that kind of content out there. Going towards a debut album and your first album out there, this has a lot to do with professionalism as well. You want to be a band that obviously represents yourself as a band that is in it to win it, really. And really without, a debut album or without any album, that's kind of hard to do. Like I said, live music is important, but studio recordings are huge, to some people more than others too. So, I feel like you've got to kind of remember that as well. Like not everyone is all into studio albums. Not everyone is all into live music, but if you've got it out there, it's definitely good regardless.
And from a venue perspective, it's important to have both, but I actually, you don't want to knock the live aspect of things, because the studio is very different than what you're getting live. And sometimes as a talent buyer, I like to see live videos and hear live recordings to get a feel for what it's actually going to be like when they show up at the venue. So you don't want to, and don't discount that, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, talking about videos, like you're saying, I think videos are even bigger than just a recorded album or a live album for a lot of talent buyers. I mean, there's a lot of times that I've represented a number of bands, and I mean, frankly, a lot of times bands even get turned down because they didn't have that live video up there. So that's absolutely important as well. Yeah, definitely. And then we're talking about following up albums after that debut album, and that as far as I'm concerned, the majority of reason for that is at that point I would assume that your band is growing, your band is established, at least in your local region, and you kind of want to grow. You want to keep your fans which I feel like an album is what really can kind of keep that retention going. You know, whether it be that you haven't, you know, released an album in over a year, or, you know, you've kind of switched your lineup so you have a new sound, which is not, you know, out of the question, especially for growing bands. You know, I mean, a lot of bands that first start in their first 5 years even are still, you know, trying to find their own sound. So, I mean, going back to, you know, no content or your debut album, you know, it is very likely that, you know, your albums may not sound the same, but, you know, that kind of gives you an advantage to be able to promote that to a whole new fan base, while at the same time kind of retaining your fans that you've already had for a while. You know, I mean, those fans likelihood aren't going to stop listening to you because your album sounds a little bit different than your original. You know, growing band.
Well,
Yeah, go for it.
it's really the other way around almost. You know, I'm working with a band, Bella's Bar Talk, right now, and they're coming out with a new album on March 26th. And this album is really the first time that they're going to be able to put out there the sound that really represents who they are right now, just like you were saying.
Right.
And the cool thing about it is that it's an opportunity to reach out and talk to fans and to engage with them with music that they're seeing live and that they're really connecting with right now, while at the same time, you know, those super fans out there, there's people that really love the music, can still go back and look at their old albums and really, you know, get into like the deep cuts kind of thing.
Right.
You know, it's really a benefit to have those earlier albums and the later albums, really.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, adding on to that, you know, in the whole, you know, not necessarily a new sound of a band, but, you know, I've learned this through working with bands who, you know, have done, you know, albums recorded in friends' studios or in basements, or, you know, even themselves, you know, musicians that are themselves producers as well. And, you know, it's not that it's a bad album, you know, but then you go back and you listen to the newer albums, and, you know, after they've done, you know, their fair amount of research and, you know, listen to producers and other albums that other artists has used producers for, I think finding the right producer is huge, for an artist. You know, there's definitely many bands who I've worked with who their second or third album is, you know, night and day compared to their first releases. And it's not necessarily because of, you know, like I said, because of the content or because it's like super crappy quality or anything like that. You know, these people are obvious, they know what they're doing, even if you're doing it yourself. But, you know, producers that are renowned for a reason. You know, I mean, producers can really help your sound become the best sound that it can be. So I think that's a huge, you know, thing for bands to really kind of think about. You know, don't just go into any studio that you can because it's the cheapest and because, you know, they have the most availability when you're trying to release your album, you know, in the next couple months. You know, take your time, do your research. An album's expensive, and, you know, the right producer is really, really a big thing, you know, when recording these albums. I wanted to kind of move on to different ways to promote an album and new content. I think, Carrie, you'll be able to add a lot here, just being a publicist as well. I think that obviously the main thing in this day and age is, you know, online presence. You know, an album needs to be on your website, regardless of if it's free or not. You know, links and an album EPK, which, Kara, you were really the one who introduced me to that when I was working with you on that album release, and, you know, having an album EPK on your website, which we can talk about in a little bit as well when we talk about publicity, but that's huge. You know, streaming, this kind of goes back to our podcast a few weeks ago, and we were kind of just throwing out ideas on booking and management. You know, streaming is also huge, especially in this day and age. Whenever you release an album, I would highly recommend doing CD Baby, and there's, you know, a ton of different outlets, but, you know, that will get you on Shazam and on Spotify and on Pandora, you know, even on iTunes and all these 20 like different outlets that half of them I haven't even heard about. But you know, that's something that in this day and age, people rarely buy. I mean, I rarely even buy albums. So, you know, streaming is a huge thing to get your album on, obviously. Social media marketing is obviously something that's
Can I
ongoing.
stop you there real quick? Because I think a really important thing to talk about there is streaming and the idea of the freemium and the idea of trial before buying, and how important it is and how hard it is for musicians a lot of times to let go of the of their baby, really. I
Yeah.
mean, their creative baby, and to allow people. I mean, you have to stream at this point. You have to. You're not relevant if you're not on Spotify, and you're not on. Maybe you are if you're not on SoundCloud, but pretty much if you're not available for live streaming, you're not relevant anymore. But what are your thoughts on free streaming and how important it is?
I mean, that's a really tough one. I'm personally all for free streaming. I think streaming is, especially for growing bands. I think it's kind of a universal fact now that bands don't make money off of albums, so especially a lot of the bands that I work with in this scene and in the live music scene, make their living off of touring shows. I don't think they really
Merch.
right and yeah, merch for sure. And I don't think they really consider Spotify as taking a huge hit on their income. I will say, like you're saying, you mentioned SoundCloud. Bandcamp is great. With Bandcamp, you don't have to go through CD Baby. You don't have to pay, that $60 fee or whatever it is, and you can stream. And like you said, try it before you buy it. You can literally just buy it on that same website as well. I'm personally a huge fan of Bandcamp. I know we've talked about this before, and you're a big fan of SoundCloud, which I still haven't really been able to, I guess, grasp. It doesn't really catch my attention as much.
It's interesting. I think it's a visual thing.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean,
I think it's a personal preference.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely do like the layout
better.
more of Bandcamp than I do of SoundCloud. However, remember we talked about that as well, and the good thing about SoundCloud is that it is kind of more social media, more socially related than Bandcamp. You can have tags, and you can tag different genres and bands and such like that. So yeah. I definitely do think I definitely think there are people out there that use that a lot, and find new music through that. I personally, going back to another service, I personally discovered music through Spotify. And I've had bands. Actually, I was on there yesterday, and they're doing something pretty cool now. Where I don't know if this is geared towards what you've been listening to, but they have their Discover Weekly playlist that Spotify puts together for you. And yesterday there were actually 2 bands on there that I'd previously worked with that I thought was pretty sweet, and I have no idea how
that's very cool.
Yeah, like how that came up really, but yeah, it was pretty cool. So I mean, there are different ways, and I do think Bandcamp doesn't do that good of a job in that sense. However, I do like the fact that you can buy your album from there. And going back to merch, Bandcamp also has their merch tab that, if any bands out there don't know about that, it's pretty damn expensive to incorporate an e-commerce aspect to your website, and Bandcamp can be a really, really good way to kind of get around that.
Bandcamp is very band friendly in that way. It's very geared towards an experience that props up and enhances and not enhances. I'm not quite sure what the right word is. Itself, so that you're listening to the trial, you like it, you buy it. Oh, you like that, you'll buy the merch. That's all wonderful, well and good. But from a user standpoint, I think unfortunately, not unfortunately, but something like Spotify or SoundCloud, like you were also saying, is much more fan friendly in terms of search and social media aspects of it.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
I mean, but the thing is that it doesn't take that much to get on all of them. It doesn't take very much to get on Spotify.
I mean, you should absolutely
CD
be,
baby,
Yeah, I mean, you should absolutely be on every single streaming. Yeah, every single streaming site you can, for sure.
But it, in terms back to the topic at hand, and in terms of CD release, you've spent so much time working on this creative baby of yours, and you spent a lot of money on it. And it's hard to figure out what your strategy is for making money back on it. And, I think a lot of bands, really are pushing towards the buy model, whereas the free streaming, this is my philosophy, and I'll say it unabashedly. The free trial enables you to connect with fans more, and then engage with them, and get them to your gigs, which is where you make your money.
Right. Yeah.
Is my opinion.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, kind of what I was talking about earlier with these musicians that are, touring musicians, that I feel like the majority of them don't really see, not being able to sell an album, as a huge hit, because it's an investment in my opinion. You're getting these fans to listen to it, and to get your brand out there, to get your name out there, and to come to your shows. That's the way I think about it. I did want to ask you, now that we're on this topic, Kickstarter and GoFundMe and all these pages, there's a lot of bands out there who do use that for way much more than albums, which I'm completely against. But what are your thoughts on these social funding sites for albums?
My thoughts are that it has to be done right, and laying out specific rules on how it's done right or not. It's kind of like who said it, they knew pornography when they saw it? Who was that? That's a really famous line. I can't even think of it. But the point is that, do you know who I'm talking? I'm talking about. Like the point is that you know when it's done right, when it's done right, and when it's done wrong, when it's done wrong.
Right.
And I think that when using these GoFundMe pages or correctly, you're engaging with your fans in a way that it gives them value. You can't go on there and just be like, we're gonna put up this CD, and so you need to give us money because we can't afford it.
Right.
That doesn't work. But but that's the basis of the first thought for doing it.
Right.
But to have a way, this what is it? Roots of Creation just did a Pledge Now campaign, and they funded a 3 CD campaign. 3, not just 1, but 3 albums
at the same to be released at the same time.
I think it's gosh, I should know this, but it's pledgeroc.com, and they got to their full goal, and they did that by engaging with their fans, and they did that by giving them value. Things like gosh, what? I'm going to look right. I don't have time to look right now, but I can't remember exactly what their
timeline was.
Their value. Yeah, but they did that by doing it correctly with you have to understand your fans. You have to understand your target audience. You have to understand what they're looking for in you to be able to understand what kind of value that they're looking for. And that's, whether it's, a dinner with you, or backstage passes, or if it's just the CD itself, whatever, you have to understand your fan base before you go into any of these things. Just like any other marketing campaign,
right.
You have to understand your target audience before you do it. So there's definitely great examples of it going well, and there's great examples of it not going well. And it's just like that. I really wish I remember. If somebody watching knows what I'm talking about with you don't know the quote I'm talking about.
I have no idea.
When I think it was actually might have been a Supreme Court thing. I sound really stupid now. If anybody's listening and doesn't, it's like, of course that's it. But no, they were defining pornography, and they knew it when they couldn't define pornography, but they knew pornography when they saw it. It's very famous. I think it was Supreme Court. Anyway,
I'll look it up, sure.
Not the.
But
I think No, done well. It's a really great tool to engage with your fans. I mean,
Yeah,
I think that it's almost if you can, if you have a really good understanding of who your fans are and what they're going to want from you, what they're going to want in terms of value, what kind of value you can provide for
right.
them, I think that definitely you should go for it,
Yeah,
because people are engaging in these kinds of campaigns. But
yeah.
if you're just going in there saying, I can't afford my, because there's a lot of people who are saying, I just can't afford my album, so please give me money.
Yeah, that's
And that's not the
definitely
way.
not the way to do it. Like you're saying. I mean, I think if you start something like that for an album that you're going in to record, like you said, well, if anyone's going to be donating already, they're already a fan. So you can also, these fans also feel it is an investment on their end, and it feels good to be a part of something. It
Hmm.
feels good to be
You
a,
helped make it. That's
right.
cool.
Exactly. It feels great to be a part of the process. At the same time, though, there's I would say that there's a large portion of people that are donating that aren't those kinds of people, that aren't already your fans. I mean, I think the majority of these campaigns do really well when it's outside people, new people that have either heard this through friends or through social media, or they've heard the name or they've heard the brand, to donate, because that's kind of outside money that you're not really initially ever really counting on. And with those kinds of people, you do have to make it valuable for them. I mean, you can't just expect someone who's never seen you, or has maybe only seen you once at like an opening show, or only heard like a few of your songs, to donate $20 to an album.
Yeah.
But if you give them a free download card, if you mail them a signed physical copy, if you give them merchandise, it's kind of paying for itself.
Well, I'm looking at pledgeroc.com, which is the Roots of Creation, and they did a triple album, so it's 3 versions of each song: a studio, dub, and acoustic, which is so cool.
oh,
And they started with the 3 triple albums for $15, all the way up to for $500. You can come to the studio for a whole day and see the magic of making the recording happen before your eyes. You may even end up on the recording,
that is awesome.
or yeah, or a VIP experience for $150, which you and a friend can come to sound check the show and hang out backstage, plus receive some signed merch. I mean, that's valuable stuff. And if
Yeah,
you
for
can
sure.
do that, I think that, engaging and really finding things that you're, different levels, because there's the passive fans, there's your main fan base, and then there's your super fans. And the super fans are going to be like, I want to be there when they made the song. So when I'm 60 years old, I can play this recording and I could be like, that was me hitting the drum, or
Right.
tripping over the drum and making that sound, or whatever it is. You know what I mean? But that those kinds of experiences are, but you have to, like, again, it's simple marketing. It's understanding who your fan base is. It's
Yeah,
understanding your target audience.
exactly. I want to talk a little bit about what we kind of touched on earlier, and then we can get into publicity and stuff. But the idea of once you release an album, releasing them by singles.
I definitely want to talk about that.
You mentioned that earlier today, and I thought that was a great point. There's I've had a band that I've worked with, and I've got pretty good relationships with publications such as Live for Live Music, NYS Music, these publications that really focus on, again, the live music scene and just kind of that whole community,
Mm-hmm.
which is obviously an enormous community. But you can touch base with these publications, and bands should not be afraid to, with or without a publicist, touching base with any sort of publication, online publication, social media outlet that they can, and being like, hey, would you guys be interested in releasing one of our singles exclusively? Which
Mm-hmm.
at that point, basically, that single is only released by that publication or that company, which is
Mm-hmm.
really beneficial for both parties in terms of getting fans and getting traffic through your website. if you can only listen to one of your songs through one outlet, you're probably going to go to that outlet. So that publication is going to get those new people, going to their site or going to whatever they're using, that, normally wouldn't. And same thing works around, I'm sure there's people that read those publications and those stories and those articles that, would in turn be new fans for the band. So I think that is that's a great idea that you came up with earlier and mentioned that, because I definitely think that is something that's beneficial, not only for the band, but for all parties. And, again, a lot of these themes for do-it-yourself bands and for growing bands is, being scared to do this. I remember when we were talking to Twitter, and it's like, well, like, I don't know if I want to post this because, maybe I've posted too much today. It really doesn't matter. You don't lose anything. Do it yourself. Up and coming bands that are trying to grow in the scene don't lose anything with trying. If anything, their name will get more recognition, their brand will get out there, and it will benefit them. So I definitely want to kind of put that in bands' minds, is don't be afraid to do anything really. Anything that could potentially help your band.
I agree completely. It's a lot of marketing is throwing stuff against the wall and seeing what sticks, hopefully with a little bit of forethought, but trying new things and is definitely has its merits. What I don't know where I was reading this recently, but it's certainly out there. What do you think about not releasing an album but consistently releasing singles? Because we buy music as singles these days.
So I think it's a good idea if you can do it strategically. One of my bands was kind of doing that. We had recorded their entire set from one of their shows, professionally recorded, 3-camera, looked amazing. And that that's expensive, and again, an album is expensive to make. So you want to, it's good to, release something over time instead of, basically just plopping it all there at once and, hoping it sticks and hoping that, it gets spread around. It's a lot easier to try to spread around, 10 songs over a period of time than it is to spread around an album entirely. In a span of like a week or two.
And it also gets to, a point that we were talking about before this podcast, which was how, a lot of times bands are like, gigging. That's really hard to say a lot fast. And then working on an album. And so there's like this radio silence when they're working on the album. And then all of a sudden we've got this album. And there's a time before the album and there's a time after the album when there's a lot that needs to be done and a lot more engagement and connection with your fan base, which a lot of times gets lost in the shuffle. But if you're constantly releasing, I think it's an interesting strategy to be constantly releasing singles. You constantly have something to talk about. You constantly have something to promote. Sometimes bands are like, well, I don't, we were talking about Twitter, our podcast about Twitter the other day. It's like, what do we talk about? Like, bands have more to talk about than they think.
Yeah.
But if you're constantly releasing singles, here's our new single, here's our new music, you're constantly remaining relevant and getting in people's minds and staying there, as opposed to this radio silence that when you're making your album and then, oh, by the way, we got this big thing coming, and that's great and it works as long as you do it correctly. But a lot of times people are so busy in the making of the album that they forget that they need to promote it before it starts.
Well, I'm a huge fan of, speaking of documenting the whole process, I'm a huge fan of when bands go into the studio to make albums, documenting it, by video and sharing that, and again, like you said, it's going back to our conversations of Twitter and social media. It's like, bands may not think that, sitting around in the studio, listening to the producer mixing the track is something that's worthy to share, but it is like, your fans want to be involved in literally every step of the
I've
process.
never seen that happen.
Yeah.
You know, as a fan,
Yeah.
that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's great. I'm a huge fan of that. So I definitely recommend, bands who go into the studio to not only, like you say, going back to your original question, is I think it's a good idea if you do it strategically. I think all these, doing it at once or doing it over time, they're both great. You need to know the right strategy to do it. And, like you said, you don't want to be in a lull of radio silence while you record and then just, plop it out to your fans and just hope, the traction gets there. But, just incorporating different elements of the recording process along with the singles. Like I said, videos of recording or, different cuts and stuff like that is really cool. And it's something that, really interests the fans and makes them feel like they are, a part of the process, which I think, is huge.
Um, I wanted I think it's really important to ask you as the booking agent between the two of us. I know that you have in our notes here talking about touring in conjunction with an album
Yeah.
release, and I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah. So, I mean, as an agent, the hardest, as an agent working for growing bands, the hardest thing is to pitch to a venue and have them immediately respond or engage them immediately. I'm a huge believer that you can't just release an album and do nothing. The work doesn't, happen for itself. And piggybacking on that, touring is probably the best way to support the release of that album, to get the word out there on the new album, especially by word of mouth. So I think, as soon as you release an album, you need to have plans to tour around that album, it doesn't need to be like an album tour, but it's like you said, you can't release an album and do nothing for 6 months or for, 4 months and then go on tour and try to promote the album then, because it just doesn't work that way. I think touring in conjunction with an album is huge. It really helps with getting in front of talent buyers. It really helps with, getting the idea across that this band, is busting their ass and is going into the studio. And, they did just come out with a new release that's huge, because when you're pitching, everything's going to be huge and it's going to be the best album you've ever heard. But, it's again, it's huge cross promotion. You get promoted, and this as a publicist, you get huge publicity because of your album, along with publicity for your shows. So I think, touring,
It's just always, as a publicist, you're always looking for that hook in the tour and the album, and it's just like it's a great opportunity to talk about the band.
right? Exactly.
It's a missed opportunity if you don't.
Yeah, exactly. And going along with touring, there's no reason that any band out there should not do album release parties as well. Especially in their hometowns and their home turf. I think for the John T, we did one in Boston and one in Stone Church, just because those markets kind of overlap and they're good markets for them. But album release parties are huge. There's no reason why you shouldn't, throw an album release show in your hometown where you have the most fans, to get that album in front of people and to have people, even if your album is free, request any sort of donation from your fans. And when it comes down to it, when you're playing a show like that in a place that you have fans, hopefully you would hope that your fans would donate to your cause. Again, it's an investment. Your fans, should know that you spent a lot of your money, your hard-earned money that you made on the road, for a month, to basically all going into the album. So yeah, I think touring around album is huge. I think album release parties are huge. I think as soon as the album drops, you need to do all of this, social media shows, Everything really ties in to the core of what you want your fans to hear, which at that point is, your new album.
What do you think about opening up the seat and seeing if
Yeah,
just in case anybody wants to jump
let's
in?
do it.
I know you had more things that you wanted to talk about, but I opened the seat up for
Oh
in
no,
case any of our guests.
you're good. I mean, I kind of wanted to talk to you as well. I mean, me as a booking agent, I'm glad you kind of threw that on me. But as a publicist, I kind of wanted to also get your thoughts on it. How easy is it to pitch these albums to radio stations? How easy is it to get radio slots? How do you go about getting album releases? That really stick and that or sorry, not album releases, album reviews that are that really stick and that are good album reviews and not just the album thrown up on some article with the band's biography right underneath it, which could be done on any single website.
I mean, how do you go about doing that? You do a lot of research and you find the right people to target, and then you go after them, and then hopefully somebody gets back to you. But it's a lot of throwing stuff on the wall. But it's really a matter of your list, and it's really a matter of building the list of the people that you really think that you're going to be your right targets. I'm not quite sure exactly what you're looking for in your question.
Well, I just kind of wanted to open up the conversation to see if you had any ideas or anything. But while we're on this topic, in talking about I mean, look, for growing bands, for up and coming bands, not only the album but the band is an investment. Your brand is an investment. These bands are obviously hoping to get to the next level, but there's a lot of money that needs to be spent on the way. And
I really think. Go ahead.
I think sorry. I just think that having a publicist reaching out and again doing research on PR firms and on publicists, again this goes back to the whole producer thing. You need to find someone who is the right fit for you. People, whoever you hire for PR and for publicity needs to know you and needs to know your brand. And again, it's really hard to swallow sometimes, being like, well, shit, I just spent $2,000 on this album. Do we really want to spend another $500, $600, $700, $800, $1,000 on a publicist to, promote our tour? And the short answer for me is yeah. I mean, it's an investment. You're not a publicist. The band is not a publicist. The band is a band. That's why bands have booking agents. That's why bands have managers, is because bands need to focus on the creativity of the band. A band does not need to be doing all this work as well as being in the band. If there's one thing I've learned in this industry is that, being all in is what's really going to make you successful. And that's no different for any band. If a band is spending half, or even if one member is spending half their time doing booking and reaching out to PR firms and reaching out to publications, that's time that you can be spending being creative and being a musician, which is what you are. I think
it's time you can be spending making the product, and everybody else is there to help you. I mean, I know I always talk marketing speak and product, but it's a product, and it's something that people want to buy and people want to be a part of, and finding the right team, whether it's booking agents, it's management, it's publicists, people who understand what you're doing, and also are going to give it to you for real and not just going to sweet talk you and tell you this is everything that you're doing is exactly what you should be doing, but tell you really you need to be doing X and Y and Z instead of A, B, and C. People who are going to be real with you and are the people that are gonna help you to get to the next level.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, again, though, like you're saying, researching the right person and the whole team aspect is huge.
So a lot of it's fit.
Yeah. And, I just can't stress that enough to artists. I know so many bands that I've worked with who've literally wasted thousands of dollars on hiring companies that do not do anything for them. I mean, going to companies that, their main clients are, in the hospitality realm. It's like, no, like you need to be working with a publicist who specializes in music. Like that's what you do.
Yeah.
Finding the right person is key, and don't jump into it. It's the same thing with the producer. I mean, stuff like this takes research sometimes and takes time to find someone that is a good fit for the job and for your band.
But it also takes knowing yourself. I mean, finding the right producer means understanding what you're looking for and what you're looking for in your sound, right? And finding the right publicist is really, or the right booking agent or manager is understanding your core values. I mean, a lot of it, there's a lot of people that are really competent in what they're doing, but understanding that there's more nuance to finding the right fit than just people who can find a list and send out press releases, I guess is what I'm saying. But yeah. So it doesn't look like anybody's going to jump in, or are you guys interested in chatting with us at all?
No.
So Circle City, Circle City, is that Lincoln Plowman? Or is that, I'm trying to connect the dots because I have a Lincoln Plowman on, okay. All right, great. Well, I'm glad you made it. Why aren't you jumping in? You should come say hi. Well, I'm glad we were supposed to have the podcast a few weeks ago, and a million things have happened, and
both our lives.
So yeah. Oh, sure. Well, we can keep talking, and that would be cool if you came in and joined us. We might go offline and keep talking about some other stuff, and then you can join in, and we can meet face to face. That'd be really cool. But yeah, he'd contacted me about a podcast that we didn't have because my mom was in the hospital. So
wait, who's that?
Circle City USA
he contacted you
on Facebook.
Gotcha.
Yes, but I didn't put the two together until he was like, "Where did you go?" when I locked you out of the blab. I banned you from the blab. So I think we've digressed a bit. Is there anything else you wanted to put into this one, or do you want to?
That's pretty much the end of my spiel and kind of what I had, kind of things that I had planned to talk about. But again, I mean, there's so many moving parts in a band, in a musician, in this industry, that these moving parts do end up tying together. I mean, an album release ties into shows, ties into PR, ties into all this other stuff that they need to be interconnected in some way. And again, bands need to not be afraid to do what they do best, which is be a musician and to reach out to whoever you need to get your brand out there and to get people who are interested in and are aware and want to be, a part of your band, a part of your brand.
I think that my takeaway from our conversation, which I don't think I've stressed very much, is having a plan. However intricate or simple the plan is, having a plan and giving yourself enough time to implement it. So many times people have been, "Oh, we're coming out with a CD next month, and we want your help to promote it." And I still do it, and I do the best I can with that, but really, if you want to do this right and you want to do it really, really well, giving yourself as much time as possible is the way to go. And
you don't want to rush anything.
And when you have that much time, you have the time to do those things like videotaping your recording sessions, right, and putting those out on social media and things like that, and it's really important to have a lot of time. So. All right, so I think that's the podcast for today. And upcoming podcasts, I think we're going to be talking with an entertainment lawyer out of Northampton, Massachusetts about entertainment and music law, which is going to be really great. I'm not quite sure which date that's going to be. Also, we're going to be talking with some festival crowds about festivals and putting on festivals and getting into festivals and marketing festivals and all that stuff. So, good things on the horizon. We are back on Blab. We have not disappeared, even though
3-week hiatus.
Yeah, life takes over, but we are back and very happy to be here. I am Kara Karma, a publicist with Simon Says Booking and Publicity out of Massachusetts, and also engageyourfanbase.com, where you can find tips for demystifying music marketing. And as always, I am joined by my awesome co-host, Erwin.
And my name is Erwin, owner of Ever Upward Entertainment, a booking and management agency based out of Denver.
Thank you. And we will be back probably next Monday for the next installment of the Engage Your Fanbase podcast. Thanks so much for listening, watching, or however you're consuming this awesome content.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.